It was supposed to be a routine mission. Selena Graves and her crew were just exploring the far reaches of space, looking for signs of life on a distant planet. But what they found was something far darker. A perfect replica of Earth, a planet that seemed to hold all the answers. Or so they thought. As they descended, the ground trembled beneath them, and strange creatures began to stir in the shadows. It wasn't just a planet, it was a prison for failed universes. And when they accidentally tore down its walls, they unleashed something far worse than they could ever have imagined. Now, something is hunting them across the galaxy, and the worst part? They've only just opened the door to a nightmare that will follow them wherever they go. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel by clicking the card button on the top right corner and hitting the notification bell so you can get amazing daily stories as and when published. Please do comment your views about the story or any topic that you want to get a story on. We'll make it happen. Let's dive in the story. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Captain Selena Graves stared at the view screen in disbelief. The soft hum of the ship's engines was the only sound filling the cockpit, but Selena's sharp, icy blue eyes were glued to the blinking data on her screen. "We've found it," she murmured, her voice a mixture of disbelief and awe. The other crew members slowly gathered around her, peering over her shoulder. Dr. Nathaniel Quinn, the physicist with wild brown hair and glasses that were perpetually slipping down his nose, stepped forward. His expression was a combination of confusion and excitement. "You're sure, Captain?" Nathaniel asked, his voice shaking with a hint of disbelief. "This is the breakthrough we've been searching for, but are we absolutely certain?" Selena didn't respond immediately. She scanned the data again, double-checking. The confirmation was unmistakable. "I'm sure," she said firmly, her gaze unwavering. "This is Earth, but not our Earth." Nathaniel blinked, trying to process the implications. "Wait, so you're saying we found Earth's twin?" A hush fell over the room as the crew absorbed what that could mean. Earth's twin? It sounded impossible, but the data on the screen didn't lie. Lena Carter, the mission's biologist, frowned. Her dark curls bounced slightly as she stood up straighter. Her voice was low but intense. "No, something's off. The surface temperature is almost identical to Earth's, but the composition of the atmosphere, it's just a little different. Something's hiding beneath it." Selena's pulse quickened, and a chill ran down her spine. "What do you mean different?" Lena hesitated for a moment before continuing. "It's almost as if the planet's been artificially altered, like it's been forced to replicate Earth. But it's not quite right." Selena's mind raced as she processed this new information. If Lena was right, something was intentionally making this Earth-like planet feel wrong. But how? And why? Dr. Omar Bailey, the ship's engineer, entered the cockpit, his tall figure standing out in the narrow space. "Everything's prepped for descent, Captain. If you're ready to land, we can make it within the hour. The planet's gravity is similar to Earth's." Selena nodded absently, her mind still grappling with the discovery. She turned back to the controls, eyes locked on the screen as she adjusted their course. "Prepare for landing. I want to see it for myself." There was a quiet moment as the crew exchanged glances, uncertainty and anticipation hanging heavy in the air. They had come this far. For years, they had searched the stars for signs of another Earth-like world. But this was something no one had ever expected. "We're not just landing on any planet," Selena said, breaking the silence. "We're landing on a mystery, and we need to be ready for whatever we find." The ship's descent began. The once calm, steady hum of the engines turned into a deep, rumbling vibration as they drew closer to the planet's surface. The crew's anticipation was palpable, yet an unsettling tension lingered. Suddenly, a low, eerie sound echoed through the ship, like the faintest whisper carried on the wind. "What was that?" Nathaniel's voice cracked slightly, and his hand instinctively reached for the nearest console. Selina furrowed her brow. I don't know, but stay alert. The sound grew louder, like a soft hum mixed with an undercurrent of something more sinister. Lena's face had gone pale. I don't like this, Captain. This planet is alive in ways we don't understand. Selina's hands tightened on the controls, her instincts kicking in. All the more reason to land quickly. We need to figure out what's going on before it's too late. The ship's exterior temperature readings continued to fluctuate as they descended, and the planet below took shape. Vast deserts stretched across the horizon, interrupted by towering mountains and dense, dark forests. It was a perfect replica of Earth's landscapes, yet there was a strange emptiness about it. The crew didn't speak for a long moment. No one dared to break the fragile silence. But deep down, Selina knew that this discovery would either answer their greatest questions or lead them down a path they were not prepared to follow. She took one final glance at the crew, all of them bracing for what awaited them. Get ready, she said, her voice steady, though her gut churned with an unknown fear. We're about to make history. The ship landed with a soft jolt, and the crew immediately unstrapped themselves from their seats. The door to the cockpit opened, and Selina led the way down the narrow hallway toward the exit. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Each step they took felt heavier, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on their shoulders. They were standing on Earth's twin, a place that could hold answers or could turn into their worst nightmare. Lena was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. This doesn't feel right. Selina glanced back at her. What do you mean? Lena's dark eyes were wide with unease. I'm not sure. It's the atmosphere. It's different. Not in a way we can see, but in the way it feels. It's like it's resisting us. Nathaniel, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up, his voice cracking slightly. We can't just leave now. We've traveled thousands of light years. We have to investigate. Agreed, Selina said, her voice firm, though the unease gnawing at her insides was impossible to ignore. Stay alert. This is uncharted territory. We don't know what we're dealing with. The door to the ship opened, and the crew stepped out onto the barren landscape. The air was thick, heavy with something that felt like it was watching them. The ground beneath their boots was dry and cracked, covered in red dust that swirled in the wind. The sky above them was an unnatural shade of purple, casting a dull glow over the rocky terrain. It was beautiful, but in a way that felt wrong. This isn't like Earth, Lena murmured, pulling her jacket tighter around her. There's something off about it. I can't put my finger on it, but it's like the planet itself is broken. Selina narrowed her eyes, scanning the horizon. We'll figure it out. We're not leaving until we understand what we're dealing with. They walked for what felt like hours, the sun dipping lower in the sky. The air grew colder, the wind picking up as they made their way toward what appeared to be a ridge in the distance. As they approached, Selina's heart began to pound at her chest. There, just beyond the ridge, stood a massive structure, dark, looming, and ancient. It looked like it had been abandoned for centuries, but it was still standing, a testament to something, someone that had created it. Selina felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. There was something about that building, something that tugged at her memory like a forgotten dream. She didn't know why, but she knew they needed to investigate. This is it, Selina said, her voice low but firm. We need to get closer. Lena's expression was one of fear, but also curiosity. What is that place? It looks old. Too old, Nathaniel added, his voice tinged with apprehension. I've never seen anything like it. The crew moved cautiously toward the structure. As they drew nearer, the air grew even heavier, and the ground seemed to hum beneath their feet. The stone walls were covered in strange symbols, symbols that didn't belong to any human language. They were dark, almost as if the marks had been burned into the stone, their edges glowing faintly in the dim light. This is wrong, Lena whispered, glancing nervously around. I can feel it. The air, The walls. They're alive with something dark. Something ancient. Selina halted, her gaze fixed on the entrance to the structure. A heavy door, made of metal and stone, stood slightly ajar, creaking in the wind. Something inside seemed to beckon them, drawing them closer. But Selina hesitated. She wasn't one to fear the unknown, but this felt different. "We need to go inside," Selina said, her voice steady, though a knot tightened in her stomach. "It's the only way we'll figure out what's really going on here." But even as she spoke, the growls began. At first, it was faint, a low, guttural sound that echoed from deep within the building, bouncing off the stone walls. Then it grew louder, a chorus of whispers, of growls, of something not quite human. "Did you hear that?" Nathaniel's voice was barely a whisper, his body tense. "Stay close," Selina ordered, her heart racing. "Whatever it is, we need to face it head on." They entered the building, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The interior was dark, the air thick with dust. The walls, too, were covered in symbols, and the faint glow from the marks outside was here as well, casting a dim, sickly light that barely illuminated their path. The growls grew louder as they moved deeper into the structure. "Who's there?" Selina called out, her voice echoing in the darkness. There was no answer, only the growling, now joined by the unmistakable sound of chains clinking against stone. Something moved in the shadows. Selina's breath caught in her throat as she caught sight of a figure, a silhouette tall and thin, with glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. "Who are you?" Selina demanded, stepping forward, trying to ignore the fear creeping up her spine. The figure tilted its head, the eyes glowing even brighter. "You shouldn't have come," it rasped. "This is the end of your world." A chill swept over Selina as she stepped back, her crew gathering behind her, hearts pounding. They had uncovered something far darker than they could have ever imagined, and the true horror had only just begun. The figure in the shadows stepped forward, its long, bony arms outstretched. The growling that had filled the air earlier now seemed to pause, as if the creature itself was taking a moment to gather its thoughts. Selina stood her ground, though her heart was pounding like a drum in her chest. "You shouldn't have come," the creature repeated, its voice rasping and hollow, almost as if it had been speaking from the depths of the earth. Selina narrowed her eyes, tried to make out any details in the dim, eerie light. The figure's body was twisted, its skin a sickly gray that seemed to shift in the darkness. But it was the eyes, bright, glowing eyes, that held her attention. They weren't human. They were ancient. "What do you mean?" Lena whispered from behind her, her voice shaking with fear. "What are you?" The creature tilted its head, its gaze flickering toward Lena. "You've come to the prison, the place where worlds like yours are left to die." Selena's pulse quickened. "What do you mean by worlds like ours?" Her voice was steady, but her mind was racing. This wasn't just some alien species or some lost race. It was something far more terrifying. The failed ones, the creature rasped. Worlds that couldn't hold themselves together. This place is a prison. A place where the remnants of broken universes are kept. And you, it turned its gaze back to Selina, its expression twisted in something close to a grin. "You've just entered our domain." A cold chill ran through Selina's veins as the creature's words sank in. A prison for broken worlds? It was beyond comprehension, and yet everything in this place seemed to confirm it. The eerie symbols on the walls, the unnatural atmosphere, the growls and whispers that echoed through the corridors. It all made sense now. Nathaniel stepped forward, his voice trembling. "You mean this planet? This Earth? It's a prison?" The creature nodded slowly, the sickly grin never leaving its face. "Yes, a prison for all the failed universes. Those that collapsed, those that could never exist properly. This is where they are kept, forever." Lena's face turned pale, and she stepped closer to Selina. "But why? Why would something, create a prison like this. The creature's glowing eyes seemed to gleam with a kind of malicious pleasure. Because the universes that didn't survive, they must be kept, trapped. Otherwise, they would tear everything else apart. What happens to them? Selina asked, her voice soft but urgent. They are consumed, the creature replied, its voice laced with a strange satisfaction. Torn apart, erased. Only fragments are left to wander. Echoes of what could have been. A horrible realization began to form in Selina's mind. The failed universes weren't just abandoned. They were erased. And this place, the one they had just stepped into, was the place where everything that had gone wrong in the multiverse was kept. And the people here, Lena asked, voice quivering, are they still alive? They are remnants, the creature said, its smile widening. Fragments of the worlds they once inhabited. No longer truly alive, but not truly dead either. The words hung in the air like a suffocating fog. Selina could feel the weight of them pressing down on her. The crew was trapped in a place where the very fabric of existence had collapsed. They weren't just on a planet. They were in a prison, surrounded by echoes of failed realities. Suddenly, there was a loud, harsh screeching sound as the walls around them began to tremble. The creature's expression shifted. It no longer looked amused. You've come too far, it hissed. Now, you'll be part of it. Before anyone could react, the ground beneath them started to shake violently. Cracks ran up the walls, and the very air seemed to thrum with a strange energy. The creature's glowing eyes flickered, and it snarled, stepping backward into the shadows. Leave this place, it hissed one final time, its voice fading into the chaos. Before you two are trapped here. As the tremors increased, Selina's mind raced. She had to make a decision. They could leave now, head back to the ship, and try to escape before the planet fully revealed its horrors. But something told her that leaving would mean abandoning the truth. Whatever this place was, it was connected to the multiverse, to the very fabric of existence itself. If they could find a way to stop it, they could save countless worlds, including their own. Stay close, Selina ordered, her voice sharp and commanding despite the fear gnawing at her insides. We need to get to the core of this place. We can't leave without answers. The crew hesitated, glancing nervously at each other as the ground continued to shake, but they followed her. They had no choice. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. As they made their way deeper into the structure, the air grew colder and the shadows seemed to close in around them. The prison was alive with a strange, pulsing energy, and they could feel it everywhere. Watching, waiting, and then Selina saw it. A massive door loomed ahead. It was old, covered in strange symbols, the same markings they had seen throughout the prison. But this door wasn't like the others. It was sealed shut, and the closer they got, the more oppressive the air became. The silence grew deafening, as if something terrible was waiting behind it. We're getting closer, Selina muttered, her voice tight with tension. We need to get through this door. Whatever's behind it, it holds the key to everything. But as her hand reached for the handle, a low, guttural growl erupted from the darkness ahead. And for the first time, Selina wondered if they had already gone too far. The growl echoed through the air, sending a shiver down Selina's spine. The crew froze, their eyes darting around the dimly lit chamber. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and writhe, as if alive, watching them. It was as though the very air was thick with malevolent intent, pressing in on them from every direction. Selina's heart raced as she slowly drew her weapon, the cold metal of the grip familiar in her hand. Stay close, she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. We're not backing down now. We need to find out what's behind that door. Lena's voice trembled. This place is unnatural, Captain. It feels like it's alive, like it's been waiting for us. Nathaniel, His face pale and his hand shaking, nodded. It's as if the walls are breathing. Whatever this place is, it's not just some abandoned structure. It's alive. The growl came again, louder this time, and this time it was accompanied by the sound of something scraping against the stone floor, dragging itself closer. Selena's grip on her weapon tightened, her pulse quickening. They couldn't just stand here. Whatever was coming had to be dealt with now. We move fast, Selena said, her voice cutting through the tension. We don't have much time. The team moved swiftly, their footsteps echoing in the silence as they rushed toward the massive door. But as they neared it, the ground beneath their feet suddenly began to tremble again. It wasn't just the walls shaking this time. The entire building seemed to be alive with the force of it. The air became thick, almost suffocating, as if the building itself were preparing for something. This isn't normal, Lena gasped, her eyes wide with fear. It's like the building is reacting to us. Selena glanced back at her, trying to hide the growing sense of unease gnawing at her gut. Just keep moving. As they reached the door, Selena pushed her shoulder against it, trying to force it open, but it didn't budge. The stone was cold and unyielding beneath her hands, and it felt almost as if something inside was resisting their attempt to enter. Nathaniel stepped forward, pulling out a tool from his belt. We need to override the lock mechanism. It's probably a fail-safe system. His hands worked quickly, but the tremors from the building grew stronger. The low growl was closer now, almost deafening, and they could hear the scraping sound of claws against stone, growing louder with every passing second. We don't have time for this. Selena snapped, her voice rising with urgency. Lena, eyes wide with fear, looked over her shoulder. It's coming, Captain. Whatever it is, it's almost here. The door suddenly jolted as the lock gave way, and it creaked open slowly, the sound of old metal grinding against stone filling the air. Selena didn't hesitate. She pushed the door open with all her strength, and they rushed inside. The room beyond was vast, far larger than anything they had seen in the rest of the building. The air was colder here, and the dim light seemed to flicker as if the very atmosphere were alive with energy. At the center of the room was a strange, pulsating core, its surface shifting in strange, incomprehensible patterns. The floor around it was littered with the same eerie symbols they had seen before, but these marks were glowing faintly, as if they held some kind of power. This is it, Selena whispered, her voice filled with awe and dread. The heart of the prison. Lena's eyes widened. It's like the planet itself is feeding off this thing. This is what's keeping it alive. Nathaniel stepped forward, his face twisted in confusion. But what is it? How is it powering the entire planet? Selena didn't answer. She was too focused on the pulsating core, the way it seemed to draw in the light, the way it throbbed like a living thing. Her hand instinctively reached for the device at her waist, a small but powerful piece of equipment meant to study alien energy sources. It was their best shot at figuring out what was going on, at unlocking whatever mystery this place held. "I need to get closer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lena grabbed her arm. "Captain, wait. Something's not right. The energy here is unstable. We're playing with fire." Selena turned to her, her expression hard. "I don't have a choice. If we don't understand this, we won't have any chance of getting out." With a deep breath, she stepped forward, her boots echoing in the vast, empty room. As she approached the core, the air around her seemed to hum, a strange vibration running through her body. The closer she got, the more intense it became, the energy almost palpable, filling her senses. She could feel it in her bones, as though the very fabric of reality was shifting around her. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently, and the low growl became a roar, a deafening sound that shook the walls and rattled the floor beneath them. The room seemed to come alive, the symbols on the ground glowing brighter, the pulsating core at the center of it all surging with power. "We need to get out," Nathaniel shouted, His voice panicked. Now! But Selena couldn't move. The energy was too powerful, pulling her in, binding her to the core. It was as if the very planet had decided that it wasn't going to let them leave, not without paying a price. With all her strength, Selena tore herself away from the core, stumbling backward toward the others. The ground cracked beneath her feet, and the building groaned as if it were dying. Run! Selena shouted, her voice breaking. Get to the ship now! They didn't hesitate. The crew turned and sprinted toward the exit, the walls around them buckling, the entire structure beginning to collapse in on itself. The ground split open beneath their feet, and the terrifying growl echoed behind them, louder than ever. They had come too far, and now they might never leave. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the crew sprinted toward the exit, the walls around them cracking and groaning like an ancient beast awakening from a deep slumber. The growls, now deafening and almost physical, reverberated in their bones. Selena could feel the pulse of the planet itself, an overwhelming force of anger and desperation, trying to drag them back into its depths. Move! Selena yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos as they bolted toward the narrow hallway that led back to the ship. The corridor stretched out ahead of them like a lifeline, but behind them, the earth seemed to split wider with each passing second, as if the planet were alive and furious. Nathaniel was the first to stumble, his legs shaky with fear. It's like the whole planet's trying to keep us here. His voice cracked with panic. We can't stop now, Selena shouted over her shoulder, urging him to keep going. We've come this far. There's no turning back. The walls around them seemed to close in as the building continued to groan and shift. The once steady hum of the prison, now an unsettling, throbbing beat. Every step they took felt heavier, as if the ground itself was sinking beneath them. The oppressive weight of the atmosphere threatened to crush them, but they kept moving, driven by a single thought: escape. Lena, usually calm and collected, was breathing heavily now, her eyes wide with terror. What do we do, Captain? She gasped. How do we stop it? This place is alive. Whatever's happening, it's because of that core, isn't it? Selena didn't have the answer. Not yet. The core was the key. It had to be. But everything inside her screamed that if they didn't get off this planet soon, they'd never leave. She had seen the way the creatures had moved, their eyes burning with an otherworldly fury. And the growls, they were a warning. A warning that they had gone too far, that they had disturbed something ancient, something better left untouched. We'll figure out once we're out of here, Selena said, her voice tight with urgency. We need to get to the ship. The core is powering this place, but we need to leave first. We can't stop it until we're safe. They rounded the final corner, the entrance to the ship in sight. But just as they thought they were safe, a loud crash echoed behind them. The ceiling above them cracked and then shattered, sending dust and debris raining down. Go! Now! Selena barked. They dove into the ship's entrance, hearts pounding in their chests, and the door slammed shut behind them just as the building let out a terrible scream. Selena scrambled to the control panel, her hands flying over the buttons as she tried to power up the ship. Come on, she muttered under her breath, but the systems were slow to respond, the planet's interference jamming the signals. A low hum filled the cabin as the ship struggled to start. Nathaniel staggered to her side, looking out the small window. It's coming. It's not over yet. His voice was filled with dread. We can't outrun this planet. It's going to destroy us all. Selena shot him a determined look, her jaw clenched. We're not going to let it. We're getting out of here now. Her fingers danced over the controls, bypassing the systems that were malfunctioning. Sweat poured down her face as she forced the ship to life. She could feel the pressure building, the atmosphere pressing against them from all sides. The growls and roars of the planet echoed through the hull, each one growing louder, more violent. It was as if the very walls of the ship were screaming at them, warning them that they weren't supposed to leave. But Selena didn't care. They had to leave. They had no other choice. The engines finally roared to life with a deafening noise, and the ship jerked forward, breaking free of the planet's grip. The ground below them cracked open, splitting wide as the planet seemed to retaliate, sending waves of energy rippling through the air. The ship shot upward, fighting against the pull of the planet, but the turbulence was brutal, and Selena struggled to maintain control. "We're not out of the woods yet," she gritted out, her knuckles white as she gripped the controls. "This thing isn't going to let us go easily." Lena looked back at the planet through the rear window. It's tearing itself apart." Her voice was a mix of horror and awe. The planet below them was in chaos, the surface breaking apart in jagged cracks, and the very sky seemed to be collapsing inward. The prison was crumbling, but with it, something darker, something malevolent, was escaping. The creatures, the echoes of the failed universes, were beginning to spill out into the void. "We need to get to the edge of the system," Selena said, her voice strained. "We need to outrun the blast radius before this whole place implodes." The ship lurched again, throwing them all off balance. Selena gritted her teeth as she pushed the throttle forward. They were almost out of range. Almost. But then a voice, low and insidious, whispered from the depths of her mind. "You can't escape." She shook her head, trying to push the thought away, but it lingered, as if the planet itself was speaking to her. She couldn't let it distract her. "Not now. We're almost there," she said, trying to reassure herself as much as her crew. The stars ahead of them seemed to beckon, the promise of safety just out of reach. But Selena knew one thing for certain. The escape was only temporary. The planet had been just the beginning, and whatever had been unleashed would not rest until it had its revenge. And they would never be safe. Not now. Not ever. The ship hurtled through space, the stars streaking by in a blur as the crew braced themselves against the aftershocks of their narrow escape. Selena's hands gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles white as she fought to maintain their course. The planet behind them was fading into the distance, but the growing sense of dread that had been gnawing at the crew refused to leave. The vibrations from the ship's engines were rhythmic, almost soothing, but they couldn't mask the feeling of impending doom. The planet they had just escaped was dying, but there was something about it, something far darker, that still clung to the air. Selena knew that this wasn't over. Lena paced nervously behind her, her mind racing. "Captain, do you think we've truly escaped? Or do we just make things worse?" Selena didn't answer immediately. She was focused on the screen in front of her, watching as the planet grew smaller with each passing second. But inside her, the unsettling feeling grew stronger. "I don't know," Selena finally admitted, her voice tight with frustration. "But I do know that whatever we've unleashed, it's not done yet. That planet may have been a prison, but it was just one of many." Nathaniel, his face pale and his hands still shaking from the adrenaline, turned toward her. "What are you saying? Are you telling us that this prison is just one of many? How many of these places are there?" "I don't know, Nathaniel, but I've seen something," Selena said, her voice low as her eyes flickered to the dark expanse of space beyond the ship. "When we were in that prison, I saw the walls. They weren't just walls. They were gateways, portals to other places, to other broken universes." Lena stopped pacing, her face twisted with fear. "Portals? You're saying this planet was some kind of crossroads? A place where all these failed universes collide?" Selena nodded grimly. "Exactly. And when we destroyed the core, we didn't just break the planet. We might have opened those gates. And now," she stopped herself, her throat tight with the realization of what they had done. "We're not safe," Nathaniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not over. The creatures we saw, the ones trapped in there, they're free now. And they're coming." Selena's heart sank. He was right. The horrors they had seen, the creatures that had once been human-like but twisted beyond recognition, were just the beginning. Whatever force had kept them locked away had been shattered. And now, those creatures would find their way to other worlds. To Earth. "We can't just wait for them to come to us," Lena said, her voice filled with desperation. "We need to stop them, to close whatever portal we've opened." "That's easier said than done," Selena replied, her eyes narrowing as she studied the data on the screen. "We don't even know how these portals work. If we go back to the planet, we might get sucked into the collapse." "We're not going back," Nathaniel interjected. "We have to find a way to stop this from spreading, from affecting other worlds." "But if what you're saying is true, if the universe is full of these prison worlds, then we're in a race against time." The crew fell silent, each of them grappling with the same terrifying thought. There were more of them out there, more broken universes, more failed worlds, all waiting to spill into the rest of the multiverse. And their Earth could be next. "We have to stop it," Selena said, her voice hardening with resolve. "If we don't, this cycle will never end. We need to find a way to shut down the portals before the creatures spread across the galaxy." "Shut them down?" Lena asked incredulously. "How do we even begin to do that? We barely made it out of there alive." "I don't know yet," Selena admitted, her mind already working, searching for any solution, any way to fight back. "But we need to find the source, the root of this. If there are others like that prison, we need to know where they are. We need to stop them from connecting." The ship's computer beeped suddenly, interrupting their conversation. Selena's eyes snapped to the screen as new data flooded in. A message, a distress signal. She immediately activated it, and the screen flickered to life. A familiar voice filled the room, but it wasn't one they expected to hear. "Selena, is that you?" The voice was distorted, crackling with static, but there was no mistaking it. It was the same voice they had heard earlier back on the planet. The creature. "You think you've escaped," the voice rasped, "but the prison is not so easily broken. You've only opened the gates. And now, you'll watch as everything you hold dear is undone." A chill ran through Selena's veins as the message ended, replaced by a deep, resounding growl. The voice lingered in the back of her mind, a warning, a promise that the true nightmare had only just begun. Selena clenched her fists. They had made a terrible mistake, and now they were being hunted. The creature's warning wasn't just empty threats. They had unleashed something far worse than they had realized. And there was only one thing left to do. They needed to fight. But first, they had to figure out how to stop it before it was too late. The clock was ticking, and the universe was waiting for them to fail. Selena's mind was a blur as the creature's words reverberated through her thoughts. The ship was silent, save for the hum of its engines as they drifted through the cold vacuum of space. The message had sent a ripple of fear through the crew. The planet they had escaped from wasn't just a prison. It was part of something much larger, an interconnected web of broken universes, each more dangerous than the last. "We're being hunted," Nathaniel said, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "That thing, whatever it is, it's not going to stop until it finds us." Selena's gaze was fixed on the stars outside, her mind racing as she tried to process everything. The creature's threat was real. The planet had been a prison, but they had unknowingly unleashed its horrors on the galaxy. Now, the gate they had opened wasn't just a pathway to one ruined universe. It was a portal to endless destruction. And it wasn't just coming for them. It was coming for everything. "We need to act fast," Selena said, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to track down the other prison worlds before they do." Lena, who had been pacing the ship in a mix of panic and frustration, stopped and looked at Selena. "But how do we even start? We don't know how these portals work. We're not equipped to fight something like this." "We don't need to fight it head on," Selena replied, her voice calm but resolute. "We need to figure out where these portals lead, and more importantly, who's controlling them." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. They had no idea who or what was behind a prison network, but there had to be someone or something responsible for creating these portals. Someone pulling the strings. Nathaniel, still pale from the shock of their escape, spoke up. You think someone's out there, controlling this? Who would do something like that? I don't know, Selena admitted. But if we can track the signals, we might be able to find their base of operations. We can't just sit here and wait for them to come to us. We have to take the fight to them. Lena looked out the window, her eyes scanning the stars. And if we're wrong? What if we're walking into a trap? We won't know unless we try, Selena said. And I'm not going to sit here and wait for this to find us. There was a long silence as the crew processed her words. Selena could see the fear in their eyes, but she also saw something else, determination. They had come this far. They had faced the unknown and survived. And they would do it again. We'll need all the data we can gather, Selena continued. We're going to need to find the remaining prison worlds and shut them down one by one. If we can get to the source, we might be able to close the portals for good. We'll be risking everything, Nathaniel said, his voice tinged with fear, but also a spark of resolve. But if we don't, there won't be a universe left to save. Selena nodded, her eyes hard with determination. Exactly. Suddenly, the ship's alarm blared, a sharp, jarring sound that made Selena's heart race. A warning flashed across the screen. An object was approaching at high speed, too fast to be a simple asteroid or debris. Something was coming. Captain, Lena said, her voice urgent. It's them. The creatures. They've tracked us down. Selena's eyes snapped to the screen. A dark, monstrous ship loomed on the horizon, its form shifting and flickering as if it were made of smoke and shadow. It wasn't just any ship. It was a vessel of the failed universes. A nightmare in motion. We don't have time, Selena said, her voice steady despite the fear surging through her. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We need to outpace them and get to the coordinates I've just uploaded. That's our only chance. The ship shook as the creature's vessel fired a blast, narrowly missing them. The impact sent the crew stumbling, but Selena quickly regained control, pushing the ship to its limits. We can't outrun them for long, Nathaniel shouted, his eyes wide with panic. They're too fast, too powerful. Selena's jaw clenched. We don't have to outrun them. We just need to stay alive long enough to reach the jump point. The tension in the ship was unbearable as they raced through the stars, the creature's ship hot on their tail. Each shot that missed felt like a near miss, each second stretching into an eternity. We're almost there, Selena gritted out, sweat beading on her forehead as she fought to keep the ship on course. With one final, desperate maneuver, Selena fired the ship's thrusters at full power, pushing them into a wild, unpredictable trajectory that threw off their pursuers. The enemy ship veered off course, its firepower missing them by inches. Now, Selena shouted, activate the jump drive. The crew scrambled to engage the ship's final line of defense, the jump drive, which would send them to a different location. They didn't know where exactly, but it was their best chance. The ship's engines roared as the jump drive activated. The stars around them warped and twisted, and in an instant, they were gone. The ship lurched as they entered hyperspace, the familiar stars replaced by the streaking lines of light. The crew collapsed into their seats, gasping for air, their hearts pounding in their chests. For now, they had escaped. But Selena knew this was far from over. They had only just begun their journey into the heart of the darkness that threatened to consume everything they knew. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun, and they would see it through to the end. Here is the story ends. If you enjoyed and want to watch more thrilling sci-fi adventures, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Dive into epic battles, explore distant galaxies, and join brave heroes as they fight for survival against impossible odds. Let us know in comments if you want next chapters to publish soon. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of the journey. Together, will keep the last light burning. Subscribe now and let the adventure continue.